Everyone on this plane was already unconscious, but it kept flying. For hours, no one was answering. No one was in control, and no one on the ground knew why. And when fighter jets caught up, what they saw should have been impossible. No screams reached the ground. No desperate call for help. No final warning anyone understood. Just silence. 34,000 feet of silence. Controllers called the cockpit again and again. Nothing. The plane stayed on course, like everything was normal, like someone was still in control. But they weren't, because somewhere between takeoff and that empty sky, the people inside were disappearing, not one by one, all at once. A passenger jet, and full of families, children, crew members, tourists heading home, still flying over Greece, still obeying its programmed path, while everyone inside slowly lost the ability to think, to react, to survive. Fighter pilots would soon pull up beside it, and what they saw didn't look like an emergency. It looked worse. It looked abandoned. A commercial airliner, engines alive, wings level, cabin masks hanging, passengers motionless, and in the cockpit, a ghost flight. So how does a plane keep flying after the people inside can no longer save it? And how long can death stay quiet before the sky finally notices? At first, it looked like a communication problem. Air traffic control called the flight. No response. They tried again. Still nothing. Maybe the radio had failed. That happens. Maybe the crew was busy. Maybe they were troubleshooting something small, something fixable. But then, the silence kept going. Too long, too clean, too absolute. The aircraft wasn't diving. It wasn't turning wildly. It wasn't sending a clear distress call. It was just flying, as if no one had touched it, as if the airplane had decided to continue alone. Controllers noticed the route, the altitude, the lack of contact. Everything about it felt wrong. Not chaotic, not violent, just wrong. A jet full of people should not go this quiet, especially not this early, especially not without explanation. Then came another sign. The crew had reported an air conditioning issue. That alone didn't sound fatal. Annoying, maybe. Technical, maybe. But not deadly. Not yet. Then a second message came through, this time more confusing. Words were broken. The meaning was unclear. The crew sounded distracted, possibly disoriented. And after that, nothing useful at all. The flight crossed deeper into Greek airspace, still silent, still moving, still alive in the sky. Military authorities were alerted, fighters were launched. That decision alone said everything. This was no longer a delayed radio check. This was a plane that had become a question, and no one on the ground had the answer. When the fighters finally reached it, the scene was almost impossible to believe. The jet was intact. No visible fire, no explosion, no obvious structural damage. It was simply there, cruising, empty in all the ways that mattered. The first officer's seat appeared vacant. The captain seemed slumped. Oxygen masks were hanging in the cabin. Passengers were not moving. The flight looked less like an aircraft in distress and more like time had stopped inside it. And then they saw one more thing. A figure moving. Inside the cockpit, someone was there. But far too late to understand why that happened. You have to go back to the beginning. August 14th, 2005. Helios Airways Flight 522, a Boeing 737 scheduled to travel from Larnaca, Cyprus to Prague, Czech Republic, with a stop in Athens. It was a routine passenger flight. Nothing about the departure suggested disaster. Nothing about the route seemed unusual. There were 115 passengers on board and 6 crew members, families, holiday travelers, children, working people. people expecting an ordinary day. The aircraft itself had flown before. The airline had operated similar routes. The crew had experience. The systems were familiar. The procedures were standard. This was not supposed to be a mystery. Before departure, however, maintenance had been performed. There had been an issue involving the aircraft's pressurization system. Technicians checked the plane, completed the work, and released it back into service. That detail would later become the center of everything, because on a modern airliner, passengers and crew do not simply breathe cabin air from the sky. At cruising altitude, the outside environment is hostile. The air is too thin. The oxygen level is too low. The human body cannot function there for long. That is why aircraft are pressurized. They create an artificial environment, a survivable one, a controlled space inside a machine moving through lethal altitude. If that system fails, the danger may not look dramatic at first. There may be no loud collapse, no immediate panic, no movie-style explosion, just subtle changes. Pressure dropping, air thinning, the body quietly beginning to lose its war. But no one boarding Helios 522 knew any of that would matter. They boarded, they sat down, they stored their bags, they waited for takeoff. The engines roared, the aircraft lifted, and the morning continued, ordinary, predictable, forgettable, at least for a few minutes. Then the climb began, and somewhere during that climb, the real emergency started, not in flames, not in violence, in air, or rather, the loss of it. Soon after takeoff, the crew noticed a warning. An alarm sounded in the cockpit. That should have triggered immediate concern. But in aviation, warnings only matter if they are understood correctly. And that is where the nightmare deepened. The sound they heard was associated with another known issue during takeoff, a takeoff configuration warning. Something crews are trained to recognize, something they expect in a specific phase of flight, but they were no longer in that phase. They were climbing, and yet the sound was familiar enough to mislead them. So instead of recognizing cabin pressurization failure immediately, they began searching for another problem, a different one, a less deadly one. That mistake bought the crisis more time. Time the aircraft had, time the people on board did not. The captain contacted ground engineers. He described an issue. He mentioned cooling, equipment, a warning. The conversation never reached full clarity. One side, troubleshooting. The other side, asking questions. Everyone circling the problem. No one fully seeing it. Meanwhile, the aircraft kept climbing, higher, thinner, more dangerous. Inside the cabin, pressure was dropping. Oxygen levels were falling. Passengers may have felt discomfort first, maybe ear pain, maybe confusion, maybe nothing obvious at all. That is the cruelty of hypoxia. It does not always arrive like suffocation. Sometimes it arrives like sleep, like fog, like your thoughts becoming softer, slower, less reliable. You may still be awake. You may still move. You may even believe you are fine, but your brain is already failing. The crew likely began to lose performance, not suddenly, gradually, which made it even harder to recognize. Decision-making weakens, memory slips, attention narrows, tasks become harder, simple actions take longer, then longer still. That explains the strange communication, the incomplete reports, the lack of urgency, the silence that followed. It was not that nothing was wrong. It was that the people best positioned to save the aircraft were losing the ability to understand what was happening. As the airplane climbed beyond 10,000 feet cabin altitude, passenger oxygen masks should deploy automatically. On Helios 522, they did. That detail would later be confirmed. Masks fell from overhead compartments, a final line of defense. But those masks do not last forever. They are designed for emergency descent, not for extended flight. They buy time. They do not solve the problem. If the aircraft does not descend quickly, the countdown continues, and Helios 522 never made that descent. The autopilot remained engaged. That matters, because once the crew became impaired, the aircraft did not instantly fall out of the sky. It continued along its programmed route, calmly, efficiently, almost obediently. That is what made the event so disturbing. Technology kept doing its job, long after the humans began losing theirs. The plane reached cruising altitude, turned as planned, headed toward Athens, all while the cabin slipped deeper into silence. On the ground, confusion kept growing. Controllers expected contact, expected descent instructions, expected some sign of normal crew action. Instead, they got absence, a moving aircraft, with almost no human presence detectable through radio. Then fuel became part of the equation. No commercial jet can wander forever. Even ghost flights have limits. The engines would keep running until the tanks said otherwise. So now there was another timer, not oxygen, fuel. 2 countdowns had shaped the flight. 1 for the people, 1 for the machine. The people lost first. When Greek fighter pilots intercepted the Boeing, they witnessed the result. The captain appeared motionless. The first officer was not visibly controlling the aircraft. Oxygen masks were visible in the cabin, and passengers seemed slumped in their seats. It looked like a frozen world. But then came the figure, a person entering the cockpit area. That detail has haunted the story ever since. He was later identified as a flight attendant. And not just any flight attendant, someone who had received pilot training, someone who may have remained conscious longer because he used portable oxygen. In the final phase of the flight, he appears to have reached the cockpit. He may have been trying to save everyone still left. He may have understood at last what the others could not. He may have been the only human on that aircraft still fighting. Imagine that scene. A silent cabin, rows of unconscious passengers, a cockpit occupied by collapse, warning sounds, fuel draining, a man pushing forward through a dead airplane, not because he was supposed to, because no one else could. That is not just tragic, that is unbearable. But even then, the odds were brutal. By the time he reached the controls, the crisis had already gone too far. The aircraft had been flying for a long time. Systems were still functioning. But survival depends on timing, and timing had already been stolen. He was reportedly seen sitting in the captain's seat, trying to take control, trying to understand the instruments, trying to do something, anything. Some reports suggest he attempted a radio transmission, a faint call, a broken effort, not enough to change the outcome. The fighters stayed beside the jet, watching, unable to intervene directly, unable to enter, unable to stop what physics had already decided. This is where the story turns from mystery into mechanism, because Helios 522 was not destroyed by a bomb, not hijacked in the usual sense, not brought down by weather. It was undone by pressurization, by a system left in the wrong mode, by human factors, by confusion, by the brutal invisibility of oxygen loss. The aircraft's pressurization selector had reportedly been set to manual. That matters more than it sounds. In automatic mode, the aircraft manages cabin pressure during climb and descent. In manual mode, that process requires direct handling. If not corrected, the cabin does not maintain safe pressure as expected, and a plane can keep climbing into danger while everyone on board assumes the environment is still safe. That is exactly why pressurization failures are so lethal. They attack the brain first. They do not wait for panic. They prevent it. Hypoxia is terrifying for that reason. It steals judgment before fear fully forms. A person deprived of oxygen may smile, may delay action, may misunderstand alarms, may forget procedures, may simply become passive. And in a cockpit, passivity can be fatal within minutes. That also explains why the crew's behavior seemed strange rather than frantic, why the radio calls were confusing, why they did not descend aggressively, why the aircraft continued on autopilot. The emergency was not dramatic enough at first. It was cognitive, silent, progressive. By the time it looked catastrophic from the outside, the people inside likely had little capacity left to fight it. This is one of the darkest truths in aviation. Sometimes the biggest danger is not what destroys the airplane. It is what disables the humans before they can save it. A fire announces itself. A structural failure is violent. A collision is obvious, but decompression and oxygen loss can masquerade as delay, as distraction, as minor technical trouble, until the mind itself begins to shut down. Investigators would later reconstruct the chain. Maintenance, selector position, warning horn confusion, crew misinterpretation, failure to recognize cabin altitude emergency, incapacitation, autopilot continuation, fuel exhaustion. Each link alone might not seem apocalyptic. Together, they formed a perfect trap. There is another reason this case lingers. It feels preventable. Not easy to prevent, but preventable. One correct recognition, one faster descent, one clearer warning interpretation, one better cross-check, and 121 people might have lived. That possibility makes the story colder, because random disaster is one kind of horror. Avoidable disaster is another. Helios 522 became a lesson, written in altitude and silence. Airlines reviewed procedures. Training around pressurization warnings drew more scrutiny. Human factors mattered more. Cockpit confusion mattered more, because what happened on that flight proved something terrifying. A modern aircraft can remain operational, while everyone inside becomes less and less able to use it. The machine can outlive the moment. The system can continue. The route can continue. The sky can look peaceful, even while the emergency has already won. And then the final stage arrived. Fuel starvation. The last certainty. One engine flamed out first. That changed everything. The aircraft could no longer maintain its old calm forever. Without fuel, even the ghost had limits. The Boeing began to lose the stability it had held for so long. The second engine followed. Now there was no illusion left. No graceful continuation. No more borrowed time. Only descent. Only gravity. Only the end. Inside, there may still have been one man trying. One last human effort against a dead cockpit, against empty seats, against physics, against minutes already lost an hour ago. The fighters watched the aircraft begin its final fall. No rescue was possible. No miracle was coming. The jet descended near Grammatico, north of Athens. Then it struck. Metal, earth, fire. After all that silence, the ending was suddenly violent, but the true disaster had happened much earlier. Long before impact, long before smoke, long before the ground ever saw the flames. The flight had really ended up there in the sky, in that sealed cabin, in that thinning air, in the moment the people on board began losing themselves. That is what makes Helios 522 so haunting. It was not only a crash, it was an erasure, a slow disappearance inside a functioning airplane, a tragedy where the aircraft kept flying after human control was already fading away. And maybe that is the most frightening part. Not that the plane stopped obeying, but that it kept obeying perfectly, following commands given earlier, continuing a journey no one was truly making anymore. Helios 522 did not fall because the sky turned hostile. It fell because silence had already taken the cabin. And by the time the world understood What that silence meant, it was far too late.